Don't move. Keep it locked.
You already know.
You're listening to the Fit Fatherhood podcast. And we're having conversations with dope dads covering the 4 pillars of fatherhood. We call it the Fit Fatherhood formula. Faith, family, finance, and fitness. That's right. These dads are setting the pace in business and fatherhood. This show isn't only about the outside success. We're getting down to who you are. Gentlemen, it's time to get fit. And now, let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the Fit Fatherhood podcast, a podcast for fathers by fathers, where we talk about the 4 pillars of fatherhood, which are faith, family, finance, and fitness. And I'm excited to have a guest with me today. He's got a unique story. And I mean, some of you guys may have gone through something similar, but I've heard JC tell his story and kind of talk about, what's going on in his experience in fatherhood. And when he reached out to me, I was like, I for sure have to get this guy on the podcast. So you may have heard him on other podcasts, but this is an opportunity for us to get a little bit of a deep dive for us here on the Fit Fatherhood podcast. My guest today is JC Bautista. JC, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing unbelievable. I really appreciate your time, Rod. Very kind of you.
No, I appreciate you reaching out. And once I got a chance to hear a little bit about what you had going on, and I see your Instagram, it looks fatherly. And so I was like, yeah, for sure, man, I got to have this guy on and kind of get an opportunity to hear his story and hear his experience, because I think it gives us as fathers a kind of a whole 360 view of what fatherhood is and can be. So I thank you for taking your time.
Yeah, brother. The main topic, I mean, for me at least, is this also a lot dealing with grief. Obviously, we're going to talk about our oldest, which passed away in June of 22. He was shot and killed. One thing I did realize, though, Rod, is I've done a few other podcasts. My energy was low. I was down, obviously, because of the situation.
Right.
But what I want this to be more than anything, I want this to be an outlet where if you got children that you think might be going down the wrong path, or maybe they need to hear a message of somebody that's hurting because of decisions, you might want to have them listen to this. If you have fathers, if you have mothers, it doesn't matter who it is, right?
Right.
To just listen in, because it's about, it's a topic of, it can happen to anybody. A kid can go down the wrong path before you know it, and you can't control it. You can't stop it. Obviously, we're on the short end of the stick, right? When you lose a kid, obviously that's not the result you want. But I believe perspective is everything, and bringing something positive out of a negative is something that's possible if you bring the right message. So more than anything, I just want this to be something that could be good for others. I don't want it to be, I know it's hard to have high energy in a situation like we're in, but at the same time, we got to bring some value to others. And if this just helps one person, it'll be worth it.
Yeah, I agree, man. Like I said, we'll get into it, of course, but I've heard. And it is hard to be high energy in a situation like that. And even hearing your story, like I was emotional about it, and I'm not, my kids are still pretty young, and I'm not going through any of that stuff, but it did make me want to hold them closer and be more available and think a little bit more, just a little bit. I just thought more, you know what I mean? Like, it just got me into thinking like, okay, I'm setting them up for the next, 10, 15 years of their life. What I want that to be, what things am I looking out for, that kind of stuff. So we've kind of talked about it a little bit, and you alluded to it just a second ago, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah. So we actually have 2 kids with us now, present with us. I have an 11-year-old daughter. She's a great kid. She's ice skate. She's homeschooled. We made that decision in the last year. She really loves it. My wife spends a lot of time with her. We did that just for her to be able to enjoy her time, more than anything else, right? And obviously she's got good schooling. I mean, we have teachers that work with her individually. We have a boy that's in a great Jesuit school. He's 15 years old, work extremely hard. It's a very difficult school to get into. Plays athletics there, baseball and football. So he's going to be finishing out. He's a freshman now, so he's got 3 more years to go. He'll be finishing up there. And so he's excited about that. It's a great program. I mean, it looks like a university, the school, so he really does love it. So 2 total different spectrums there. My wife and I, we've been married 18 years. And then we had our oldest, which passed away in June of 22. He was 25 years old. He ended up being shot and killed. And we went through a situation where he ended up in substance abuse. Really got caught off guard on that. That's not something you expect. And from there, kind of just went downhill. And that's the situation we're dealing with now.
Wow. How you said that was in 22?
June of 2022. Yep.
And that's still pretty fresh. Like I feel like that's always going to be fresh, but I mean, like that's not too long ago. How, if at all, how does that like affect you parenting the other two? Or is there something that you do differently now, or maybe that you're looking back on that and maybe make adjustments, or is it like, like you said, you kind of caught
Yeah.
off guard, so it wasn't.
It's a little tricky. It's a little tricky because both of our kids are very good kids up to now. My boy's very good. My girl's very good. There's times I'm pretty strong. The 11-year-old she still lives in a cocoon, right? She's still, we've tried to do our job of keeping her in a fairy tale land as much as possible. Obviously, this was a big shock to the system when this happened with her brother. The older one, I am pretty strong on him. I'm strong on him because, I mean, we just have complete honesty. One thing I do have on my kids now is I'm an open book more than before. I feel like I have to share every failure I've had, things I've done right, things I've done wrong. It is kind of, sometimes it's a little tough on him because I'm more tough on him because I understand now the consequences of decisions, right? And we always hear those things, decisions have consequences. And now that I look back, there's a lot of things we missed. There's a lot of things we didn't capitalize on. There's a lot of things we didn't do that we would have done different. A lot of that had to do with the maturity of parents, had to do with not awareness of not knowing how to handle a situation. I mean, I don't think there's a handbook to deal with a kid and a young adult that ends up in substance abuse. I mean, there's no manual on that, right?
Right.
But if we look at this now, when I look at my kids now, they know I'm not going to be far from pulling the trigger in a situation where if they start messing up, I mean, I'm going to take action quick. One of the things we did, Rob, which is important for a lot of parents, is when we started dealing with a lot of challenges with him, we weren't aware he was on substance abuse, but when we became aware of the challenges and the problems and more issues we were having for such a long time, we covered those things up. And that's the worst thing you can do as a family, okay? Because it's one thing I tell my kids now. If you got, let's say you got cut, right, and you have a Band-Aid on it, there's no way, if you got a lot of hair on your arm, there's no way you can take that Band-Aid off little by little. You literally got to pull it off. You got to rip it off. And it's going to hurt, but you got to rip it off because that's the only way the wound's going to heal. And one of the things we did for so long, Ron, was we really covered this up. We knew there was problems, there was challenges. We weren't aware of the substance abuse, but we never really wanted his grandparents to find out. We never wanted the family to find out. We never wanted to taint his reputation. From the outside, if you looked at our family, we were a great family, right? I mean, we still are a good family, but we were good, There was no issues. You come to our house, there was no problems. The deep down inside, we were dealing with a lot. And if I look back on that, which is something now that I have, is I really have very little regard for what people think now. I thought before I felt like that, but now I feel like that 10 times more. I really don't care what people think now. And the reason why is because when we went through this situation and he ends up, he's passed away and he's dead, there's no hiding that, right? There's no hiding the situation. He got shot. There's no hiding a funeral. There's no hiding a viewing. There's no hiding none of that stuff. So at the end of the day, you can no longer live a lie, and one thing that if I could advise a father or mother or parent is don't be afraid to take action on something that you think is going to be painful, right? Because it could be painful now or it could be painful later, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be painful. So take action on it. It is what it is, make a move.
Yeah, I like that advice, man, because I feel like that happens a lot is where we kind of put, like you said, we cover it up. Like things are happening and we kind of, not like we minimize them, but we, oh, it's not that bad, or like you said, kind of the outside world. We don't want people to know. And I know that happened a lot in my family. My brother-in-law was recently, well, I mean, he's in recovery now. He's doing much, much better now. But he had a few years where he pretty much lost his whole life. Like his whole family dissolved, he lost his job, went to jail. Like it had a whole, like, it was like a movie. You know what I mean? Like it was like watching a movie, but being on the inside. But I think a lot of what was going on with them, we did try to kind of like mask or hide or like hearing people talk about it, they would kind of make it seem like, these are normal things that he was doing. And they're clearly not normal things. Like he wasn't like this before. And I think we do that a lot. And I agree with you. I think there has to be a level of you have to rip the Band-Aid off and be completely honest so you can get to the problem to try to heal it.
The fear of criticism of others is powerful, Rod. Not only, and as we believe as dads or moms or parents or adults, you really think that you're an adult, but the reality is, when you're afraid of what others think, and when you're afraid of consequences of what can happen, you never really operate. You're not able to operate fully. You just can't. And that's one of those things that you're gonna have to tackle it head on. I mean, if there's an issue, if you see there's something wrong, you got to tackle it head on, and don't worry about what the outcome can be. Because at the end, like, we're paying the highest price possible you can pay for ignorance of the situation of not taking action at due time, right? Just put it aside, whether it's right or wrong. This is admitting fault, right? Because if you look at the situation of being a parent, you might say, well, the greatest thing that you and I can accomplish is to have a child that is a productive individual for society, for their spouse, for their husband, for their wife, for their kids, that they could be productive out there in society. That's the best thing we could have because that's our offspring. And we invested time into that. And we got something out of it long term. But in our situation, we failed in that area, right? Because ours is not here with us, right? So this is a lesson to other parents to say, hey, look, you don't ignore a situation. I knew he was smoking weed. I knew that. So I didn't think it was a big deal. I knew he was hustling, but I didn't think it was a big deal, right? Because as a kid, I did stupid things as well. So guess what? That shouldn't be a big deal if he did those things. But what you don't understand is that the things that are on a big deal, on a small scale, become a big deal when they come unstoppable, right? Because it leads from one thing to the next. I'm not saying, look, I know right now out there's a lot of things, like I know weed usage is, a lot of people need that for their health. I know it's something a lot of people do, which is okay. But the reality is there's too many kids out there smoking weed for no reason. There's too many kids out there drinking alcohol for no reason. There's too many kids out there vaping, popping pills, doing stupid things they shouldn't be doing for no reason. And guess what? That is a trickle down effect that long term you can't stop it because I was reading something the other day and I was telling you, look, I never met a person that's an addict that took their first drink. Let's say if they're an alcoholic, I never met them and said they say, now my end goal was to be an alcoholic. Or if there's a person that's a drug addict, they say, oh, when I took my first hit of drug, my goal was to be a full-blown addict and just destroy my life, destroy my family. Like that was my end goal. No, it wasn't the end goal. It was, this can't hurt. It's just one time, right? We're just having a little fun. It's not a big deal. And it's fun until you can't control it no more. It's fun until you threw yourself in a predicament where maybe mentally you can't handle it no more. And it's something you have to address fast and you got to be on it,
Yeah. I you know what? I've never thought about it that way, but yeah, I don't think I know anybody that's an alcoholic was like, oh, it's the first time I had a drink and then I was an alcoholic. Like there's always some build up to it.
Or that their goal was to be an alcoholic, right?
Right. Yeah. No, we're just taking the edge off, or we're just kind of whatever the situation is, right?
Absolutely.
We're using it kind of as a coping mechanism, and then before we know it, it worked, right? It helped us, and now we're dependent on it, and not only are we dependent on it, we're addicted
100%.
to it. Oh man! So with all of that in mind, I know you say it kind of changed how you're parenting now, and you're more open and you kind of take things head on. What does that look like for you guys? Like, I mean, I'm assuming with an 11-year-old is a little different. With a 15-year-old son, you can probably be a little bit more. I don't want to put words in my mouth, but you can probably be a little bit more aggressive with it. But what does that look like parenting now?
Yeah, I mean, it's understood that, you could get drug tested at any minute, right? I used to think my wife was a nice FBI agent with our oldest, and it still wasn't enough, Rod. So you can never do enough. Whatever you think is right, plus that, you need to do that, right? Whatever comes in your conscious and you feel you need to do, you need to take action on that. And sometimes, because what happens is the kids get out of control, right? Because right now they might be kids, but they're going to be adults one day. And then when they become adults, you can't control them anymore. And then when you can't control them, it's a situation where now you've lost them, right? Because you can't bring them back in. So whatever comes to your mind that you think might be extreme, you might want to take action on that. Let's just say that, right? And that means whatever comes to my mind at the moment, he knows anything. I'll be willing to do anything not to lose my kid, right? Because in my mind, I'm not going to experience this a second time. I'm not going to do it. So as long as he's in alignment, as long as he's moving in the right path, guess what? Open reign, you have everything you need from us, and guess what? You're going to be treated like you're the king and you're the queen of the house. That's the way it's going to work. The minute you start derailing a little bit, don't think I'm not going to take you off the track and things are going to change fast, right? Your life will be uprooted in a second because I'm not going to leave it to chance. You know, one of the biggest, look, regret is we should all operate on regret as our guideline, right? And the things you regret in the past that you've done, that should be the guideline of the way you're going to be able to have the trajectory of your life, you know? And one of the biggest regrets I have is, you know, plus my wife, is just not taking action at the right time, right? Number one. Number two is not taking, you know, just taking action at the moment of whatever's on. I'll give you a perfect example, right? You know, the last conversation I had with our oldest was a horrible conversation, just horrible. You know, a lot of hurtful things were said, and we never talked again. We never talked again. And I had in my heart so many times I was going to call him. I never called him. I never called him. Why? Because there's a lot of ego sometimes in us men, you know. And I never picked up the phone. I never reached out to him. I never did that. He never reached out to me, right? And it ended up being that once he passed away, that was it. It was over with, right? There's no more chances on that, you know? So regrets are a guideline. You know, you got to really, whatever's in your heart and your gut at that moment, you got to take action on that with your kids. And sometimes you might feel like, I don't know if I should do that. No, do that. Do exactly that. Do that and more, because that means that might be the solution to avoid a conflict in the future.
So is that a conversation that you guys have as a family? Like, hey, this is going forward. This is what it's going to be. Like you just told me, as long as you're on track and you're doing everything the right way, I'm going to treat you
100%
accordingly. And then if something happens, then hey, you know me. You know how is that something you guys kind of sit down and talk about?
100%, bro. I mean, I'll give you an example. You know, for a while, my wife thought he was having challenges with substance abuse, but we didn't have proof of it. I didn't think he did, you know, and she had looked into not rehabs, but like going to military schools when he was really messing up, right? Or going to different places for schooling. And it was just too expensive. We couldn't afford it at that time, right? But now what I know now, Ron, I pay for private school now, right? Guess what? All that money would be taken out and you'd be going to that place. That's the most uncomfortable place, and that's where you're going. That is, we're going to take action on that. Maybe it'll uproot your whole life, but maybe it's the chance of me having you here 10, 15 years from now, right? Just in case you go down the wrong path. So that conversation is pretty clear in a situation like that. Yeah, and I know that might not be where people have the means to do certain things like that, but whatever you can do within your means, take action on that, right? Because sometimes we're kind of locked into situations based off economics and fear and this and many other things, but you better take action on it, because the feeling you kind of have later for not taking that action could be difficult to deal with.
Yeah. That's I mean, I like that thought process in general. Obviously in relation to fatherhood and your kids, but just in general as a man, that taking massive action is extremely important. Like in anything that we do, right? And like you mentioned, when you have that thought, you're having that thought for a reason. Whatever it is, right? And so you got to act on it. You got to take action. And then if you take action and it turns out not to be what you thought it was, then you can always adjust. But the other way is tough. Like I used to tell coaches when I used to work with coaches, it would be like with athletes, you can't be their friend first and then ask for respect later. Because if you're their friend first, when you kind of lay the law down, they're gonna be like, yo, what happened, man? I thought we were cool. So you have to come in and earn their respect first and then be friendly later, right? And I think this is one of those situations where as a parent, like I don't want to be my daughter's friends, either one of them. But I do want us to have a relationship where we can have conversation about whatever's going on, and like we have friendly conversation, but respect first, friend second.
100%. I agree. And your kids have to understand that you're not afraid to set it off. Your kids need to understand that, right? Your kids need to understand that you are not afraid to set it off and make a decision, because there's a lot of parents that are afraid to make decisions. We were afraid to make a decision. We were afraid to tackle this head on. We were very afraid to do that, and it cost us. So you cannot be afraid to tackle it and just take action on it, and it is what it is, and then you set it off. You have to, you're going to do it. And it might seem a little strong. There's people going to listen to this and say, well, I don't know if I agree with that. Okay. Well, you might not agree with it, but it's coming from a perspective of an individual where a family is destroyed, right? Because this trauma my kids got to deal with, we got to deal with, it's not simple. I give a perfect example. Yesterday, man, I had a period of time where I've been good for a little bit. For a few weeks, I've been good, about 2, 3 weeks. And yesterday, I was just eating some lunch in the house by myself. My wife is up in New York. She's in Virginia with my little girl ice skating. She went to go visit her family up in New York. And man, I was just there having lunch, and I heard on IG, I heard a song, right? Man, I cried for a half hour there in front of our kids' ashes. A half hour I was crying there. Out of nowhere, right? Grief hits you when you're not even expecting it, right? So to deal with that type of trauma and that challenge inside of you, there's no overcoming that. You can only hope to provide value to others. You can only hope to provide value to a certain person that this could be a positive experience for them. It won't be for us, but it could be a positive outcome for them, right? Because maybe somebody hears this and they say, you know what, maybe I got to make some different decisions. Because at the same time, when you're talking about fatherhood, there's a lot of kids that they feel like they're not loved by their dads and their moms, right? There's kids out there that really feel that they're not loved by their parents, They
Right.
feel like they're neglected. And that's something that's important, because when a kid feels like that, sometimes he makes bad decisions, and then you try to pinpoint where to start. Those are all things that are important, who you choose to have kids with, right? Are you really committed to have children with that person? Another topic would be in your family, are you going to be faithful or unfaithful? That's important, that has all repercussions on your family. Your kids watch those things. And those are things that could lead to a challenge long term. And there's no guarantee any marriage can work, right? There's no
Right.
guarantee anything is going to work. But you got to stack the odds in your favor, not against you.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree completely. And you talking about like grief being kind of a process or being a journey. How did you get to this point, right? Because when it happens, obviously you've got to be torn up and kind of going through a wave of emotions. How do you get to a point now where you're able to kind of talk about it in a means to help others? What's the process there?
Well, hey, you know who Wes Watson is?
I do.
Okay, so I got coached by him, and I had questions for him. I asked him questions about this, and he explained to me that you gotta give back. You have to give back to be able to deal with something like this. And before I had ever spoken with him, I heard him on Brad Lee podcast. He had said one time that depression is a magnification of the past, and you're not going that way. Those are some of the most powerful words I've ever heard. I never heard it like that. And the reality is, you only get down and depressed when you think about the past, right, or circumstances that you can't control. Okay, right now in the present you can't feel like that, but in the past you could. So once you go visit that spot that you don't want to visit, that is grounds for you to be able to be destroyed, right? But if you're in the present and you try to provide as much value as possible, number one, it helps you, but number two is now I'm treating this as our oldest. I'm providing a message through our oldest to help others. So that helps out the process of grief to say, yeah, you're hurting, but somebody else can get help out of this. And that's something that could be important for others, and it makes us feel good at the same time. So for me, you know how many podcasts I reach out to, Rod? I mean, I look at their shows. I kind of get a feel. I get a paint their page. There's a lot of people I reach out to that they don't answer to me. They leave me on. They leave me on red. And it's okay. I have no problem with that, but I know there's a few of them that want to hear the message, and there's listeners that are going to listen to this. That's going to be valuable.
Yeah. Like I said, far be it from me to gatekeep information like this, right? Because just because I'm not going through it doesn't mean that somebody else isn't. And I don't know what the future holds for me. I might end up going through it, and having this as a reference point could help prevent it for me or for someone else. And so I appreciate you working through all of it and getting to a point where you can share your perspective on your situation, because like I said at the beginning, it's a unique one. I mean, obviously other people are experiencing it, but not a whole lot of people are talking about it in the way that you're talking about it, in a helpful way, right? A lot of people are still visiting that place and still like really depressed about it when they talk about it, and I'm obviously it brings up emotion for you, but you're using that to fuel the conversation to help others, which I think is really, really cool.
That taps into also self-improvement, though. You have to be present in your self-improvement. You have to be working on yourself, because you can't think that you're going to handle this challenge with the same mentality you had. If I would think the same mentality I had May of 2022, I'd be able to handle this challenge right now, then I'd be delirious to think, or delusional to think, that I would be able to not overcome, but to be able to over this situation. There
Sure.
has to be an extensive amount of work on yourself. And the amount of work you have to do on yourself, which is, look, the statistics say, Rod, that most people, I think it's 90-something% of the people never pick up a book to read after they finish high school. 90-something% of the people don't pick up a book to read after they finish high school, okay? Let alone how much people spend so much useless time on social media. Now, this is a great tool, okay? Look at the relationships I built on here, right? I'm on a podcast with you. You're in California. I'm here in Miami. Hopefully, this reaches a lot of people. The other shows I've done, this is a huge outlet. This is super powerful, this social media space. The challenge is that so many people, parents, dads, moms, kids, they use it for the wrong things, right? They use it to watch silly videos. They use it to look at dumb stuff on there that's irrelevant to their growth. And they spend countless hours. I do it myself. I'll catch myself around 45 minutes an hour, and I've been just scrolling, eating crap, looking at stuff on my phone. I'm like, how did I just waste all this time? I'm not investing any time on myself based off of watching something idiotic online, right? Where this could be the amazing tool where if you invest your time, you get so much of a return on it, because you're able to get, I mean, there's so many people, like you talked about athletes. I mean, how old are you, Rod? What's your age?
41, just turned 41.
So we're the same age, right? So when we were kids, if we wanted to get information on an athlete, the only thing you would have was a magazine that you would read, right? Then you would get a Sports Illustrated, and you would get a story of a person, or maybe they did a documentary piece on TV that you would watch, and you'd be like, man, that was an awesome story about this athlete or about this person. Now, literally, you have an Instagram where I can log into Instagram, and I could go and find an athlete that I really like, that I think has the right mentality. And I could go on there, watch his feed, and watch what he posts, what he thinks about, what he works on, what he's doing, what he's reading. He talks about his mentality. I mean, that's amazing to have. But most people spend no time on those things. They spend time on other things. It's kind of like when you look at IG, you post a picture, like I post a picture of my family on my IG, I get like 100 likes or something like that, right? I'll post something really deep and valuable that I'll write out myself. Not that I copy pasted from somewhere. I might get like 1 like on it, you know? And it's so evident what people are not conscious on the right things. They're conscious on the wrong things, you know? So the self-improvement space, which is reading books, not reading novels, okay? Reading self-improvement books. You got to be listening to YouTube videos on self-improvement. Using IG, any platform you can for self-improvement. You got to use those things because it's the only thing that will alter your thinking to process different, to put yourself in a position to have a different perspective. What separates us humans from others is the perspective. We have the ability to flip perspective on anything. Anything tragic, anything amazing. A person that has something amazing happen to their life, they could switch a perspective and make it horrible. Somebody that has something horrible happen in their lives, they could switch perspective and make the best thing out of it, where it could be something that could be so powerful for others. That is the biggest difference between us humans and any other species that exist for that point, right? Is that we have the ability of perspective, but you have to have a different perspective than you adopt from others, because our thinking can only take us so far. That's why the self-improvement. And I went a little bit on that, Ron, because it's been very important for me, right? Working out's important for me. Controlling what I eat, you know. Food for me is a real big challenge, you know. And anytime I get off course, it's only a matter of time before emotionally I'm off course. So a lot of people sometimes, before they used to have jokes with me when I started making changes, losing weight. They, oh, who do you think you are? You're the Rock now? Or do you think you're the, you're the marathon guy? You know, they always had all these jokes, right? But I was doing it because I wanted to improve myself, not knowing that to deal with a situation like this, those habits that I built over a period of time, over years, were super beneficial for me. I'll give you an example. 2 months in to him passing away, I gained 35 pounds in 2 months, right? 35 pounds I gained in 2 months. You know how much eating you got to do to gain that much weight?
It's a lot.
So
Yeah.
That's a lot of weight, brother. But guess what? I put myself in perspective. I heard Wes talk about the presence of magnification in the past year, and they're going that way. The next day, I said, we're going to start taking action on small things. Awaken time, eating better, getting a workout in. And guess what? That just builds and it builds and it builds. Just like that builds to the positives, the negative things you do also build to the negative as well. It'll build up whichever way you want, but you got to have that focus of what your end goal is on that preparation, that growth, on that self-improvement from that side.
Let's stay there because I'm a self-improvement junkie. Like I think if you're not getting better every day, like if you're not getting better, you're getting worse, right? And so I'm kind of always looking at things and always trying to find new ways to better myself in every field that I'm in. So you got coached by Wes. What are some other things that you mentioned? You start taking care of your health, right? What did you do fitness programs? Or was it more?
Yeah, but more than anything for me was I just had questions about dealing with this grief and
Yeah,
things I was going through mentally, right? I really needed help on that side, That was super beneficial for me. He's a very elevated individual. I know he's very colorful for his words. He's a very aggressive individual, but the pain he's been through, very few people have a positive outcome through a situation that he's been through and how many lives he affects. So I'm very grateful for him, and I just had
yeah,
certain questions I wanted to handle mentally internally, which he helped me to have a different perspective. Talking about perspective, he allowed me to put a different perspective on something that can be very difficult for someone and have a different mentality towards it.
yeah. I when I first got introduced to Wes, I was in a coaching program getting coached by someone, and he mentioned Wes because the guy I was getting coached by lived in San Diego at the time. Wes was, I think he's still in San Diego, but they live relatively close, and they were trying to talking about going to the gym with him or whatever. And the more that I got to like paying attention to the stuff he's doing, yes, he is colorful, as you mentioned. But if you listen to him talk, he's super smart. Like the stuff that he's saying is much more deep than the words he's using. And sometimes the words he's using are super deep. Like the stuff that I hear him say now, that like if I see that he's being interviewed or he's on a podcast or he's got something going on, I'm like, oh, I got to tune in because there's going to be a gem or a jewel there that I could take away and try to improve myself. Outside of Wes, I know we mentioned reading books. Are there any suggestions for books or podcasts or anything
If a
that you
person,
know that you're using?
if a person started off from the beginning, I would probably say I listened to this book over and over and over at the beginning. It's going to be Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. He is a very elevated individual, especially in his book. I would recommend the Audible. The book is good, obviously, but the Audible is different because it's him talking about his story and then he puts perspective in every angle of what he did step by step by step to change himself from who he was to becoming a Navy SEAL. And obviously, we're not going to become Navy SEAls, okay? But the idea is he's a person that transformed his life. That's the message,
Right.
okay? It doesn't mean you have to go run 8,000 marathons or nothing like that. What it means is you have to adopt the thinking of a person that changes life. And that book, for me, I listened to that book over and over and took notes over and over because it was every time I listened to it, I got something different from it, right? So Can't Hurt Me is very important. And then after that, I mean, I really, there's just so many authors, so many books, Rod, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That people can get into. I mean, it's just self-improvement. It's just such a big world, It really is,
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
is.
No, that's interesting. I just what is the book
But I
that I
would
just
say, I'm
started?
sorry to interrupt you.
No,
Sorry to
go for
interrupt
it.
you. Outwitting the Devil is a great book to be able to
Okay.
read. I read that book many years ago. I reread it a few years ago, and it's an amazing book for people to be able to get their hands on.
Okay. Yeah, I use Audible too, and I just finished Spark, which is like a leadership book. And when I finished it, it suggests books for you. And Can't Hurt Me was
Hmm.
at the top of that list. And I was like, man, I've seen it several times, obviously every time, and I obviously see Goggins all over the place. I'm like, at some point, and I've heard great things about the book. At some point, I've got to listen to it, and so I added it to my queue because I already had a book ahead of it. But I added it to my queue because I'm like, I gotta. I've heard him talk before. I've heard his story before, but I feel like in the book is going to be something different that I can take away. And as you just said, you listen to it a bunch of times, and every time you listen to it, you got something different. So that's definitely on my list of things to do. What was the second one again? Say it again for me.
Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill.
Okay, Outwitting the Devil. Let me I'm getting
Yeah.
the notes here.
This book was written in the early 1900s. I mean, he wrote Think and Grow Rich. I never heard of Think and Grow Rich before.
Yep.
So he wrote Outwitting the Devil after Think and Grow Rich. But he didn't want, his wife never wanted that book to be published because how controversial it was going to be. And he promised her that it would not be published until they both passed away, which is why it was published so many years after. But this book was written in the 1900s, and the insight he has of things that are going on today in society, he was talking about it in that book. And it's amazing just the outreach that these people had back then, their awareness. So it's really impressive. That book is extremely, especially in the times we are in right now, with how things are really weird right now in this world, right? And in this country especially. That book is very, very on point, extremely on point.
Okay. All right, cool. I got to add that to my list too. Every time I do one of these podcast interviews, or I add another book to the list. And so my list is growing. But good thing that I listen to books on tape, because if I had to read them, there'd be no way I get through all these books by the end of the year. But Audible has been, and no plug here, but Audible and I use Everand too, have been great in helping me get what I need to get. And I can do it anytime. Like I'm driving, I'm listening to a book, or I'm at the gym, I'm listening to a book. And so I'm trying to, as much as I can, get it in, because my schedule's impacted. It's hard for me to find time to sit down with a book. So I would suggest those two books. And then if you are able to, get one of these audio book situations, one of those apps, because that's going to be a way for you to get it in. And I can listen to it multiple times. Like I can go to a specific chapter and just hit that chapter, right? I don't have to go through the whole book all over again. So I would suggest that for, like I said, I'm not in a situation, but I suggest that just in terms of personal development and self-mastery. If you're going to add in reading, listening, I agree, works too.
I agree. That's amazing. And the podcasts are good. The Dad Edge was that was one of my favorite podcasts that I was able to do. His show, that was a big, that was big for me to be able to do that, to share a message on his show. And, at the same time, for me, Andy Frisella was very big. I met all these other people, not that I met them, but I was introduced in the social media world and podcasts through Andy Frisella. Through the MFCEO project, which was his original show. Maybe that's something totally different, but the MFCEO project, I mean, he has all his stuff on his podcast. You can go back all the way to when he started. And everybody I found, Ed Milet, David Goggins, all these different people, I found them all through Andy Frisella, all of them through him. And he's super beneficial. I mean, that guy, he's very political right now, right? He's very political right now, but if you can get through his message, there is massive value, extreme value that he brings to society and to people. At least he did for me.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so you've worked on you worked on yourself, and you've gotten better, obviously, because of where you are now, and with your let me do this. So you and your wife have been together for 18 years. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't think that we have, because I have a fatherhood podcast, do a bunch of fatherhood stuff.
Sorry, 16 years. Sorry.
Okay.
16 years.
That's fine.
16 years.
16? That's fine. 16, 18?
Yeah.
I don't think we have enough conversations around the importance of that piece to fatherhood. There's a lot of talk about separations, divorces, what happens with husband and wife when they're no longer husband and wife, and everybody can rain on each other's parades. But the importance of that relationship between mom and dad and husband and wife is extremely, extremely important for the raising of your children. So if you don't mind kind of talking a little bit about your relationship with your wife, like, and obviously going through something so traumatic, the two of you you working on yourself, I'm assuming she's working on herself. What are some of the things that you guys do to stay connected? Because a lot of guys, and I see this all the time, it's like the 7-year itch, or after 8 years, things started to get crazy, or the kids got a little older and then she started to change and all that stuff. How are you guys staying connected and keeping it fresh, I guess would be the best way to say it?
Marriage is a lot of work, right? People sometimes say marriage is not work, they're full of crap. Marriage is a lot of work because every level you have to really evolve and grow to be able to keep a relationship together. When a challenge like this happens, and it's something you bring up about marriage, how important it is. Our oldest that passed away was my stepson, but I raised him since he was 10 years old. Okay. So it's like if he was my kid, I love him as he was my kid. And, you know, she had a child at 16 years old. She was a baby having a baby, right? That's a challenge right there. Number
Right.
one. Number two is they ended up separating. So now you're a young individual with a kid. Then you have separated parents with a kid, right? Well, that's two strikes in a situation like this. So this is not to knock anybody. This is awareness, right? That's why I talked about be very important on who you're going to pick and what you're going to do, because your decisions have consequences. And what that means is if you're fully not 100% committed on a person, you're fully not 100% committed on what you're going to do, make sure you make decisions according, okay? You
Right.
could keep your stuff in your pants, right? And if you're a girl, you could keep your pants on, right? So that way you don't put yourself in that predicament, or be smart, maybe use protection. And don't end up in a relationship and lock yourself into something that you're not going to be 100% committed to, that you're not going to be all in on, because the reality is you're going to get rocked. You're going to get rocked. Look at us in our situation. We've been rocked very, very hard, and it hasn't been simple. There's been ups, there's been downs, and the reason why is because every insecurity possible that you have bottled up, that you've ever kept inside a little bottle, it all comes out. It all comes out. Every single insecurity possible, because then you have all the doubts, all the worries, all the things. I mean, one of the things you think about is, how is this going to affect our relationship long term, right? How are we going to maneuver this? Are we going to be able to overcome this? Are we going to be able to move forward from this? How are our kids going to handle this? How have we affected our kids because of the situation we put them in, right? Those are all things that take a massive toll on marriage. It really does. But the only way
Right.
you can address those things is by you improving. And I send this on the dad edge, as a father, if you're married, whether you're a dad or you're married or you're not, whatever the situation is, you're going to have to put time of work in, but you have to make sure you don't make the mistake that you ever put it in your spouse's face or you put it in your kids' faces. Never do that, right? Because that is not good. You have to be working on yourself for the simple reason that you want to provide the best person, the best human possibly you can to that significant other or your kids, but you can never point that out to them. We can, well, you're not doing this and you're not doing that, right? Well, that's
Right.
not good, right? Leadership is influence. So if it's still not evident, maybe you still haven't done a good enough job in that area yet, right? So guess what? You got to keep working on those things. It's kind of like assuming responsibility. Think about this, Rod. How many times do you see a marriage, they've been together 10, 15, 20 years, and the guy looks like a freaking whale walking around, right? And the guy looks horrible. The wife looks horrendous, right? She looks like she's like 250 pounds, not taking care of herself or whatever. I'm just using a number, right? The guy's
Mhm.
out there drinking all the time, hanging out. The wife is just making dumb decisions. And then they separate. And you look 6 months later, and you look at the guy, and he's like, man, that guy now, he's been going to the gym every day. He's eating good. He's on top of his stuff. The wife now looks fly. She looks amazing, sexy as hell. Well, why didn't you do that when you were in the marriage? Why, if you were married so long, why wouldn't you put the work in when you're married to do those things instead of
Right.
waiting to be separated and change? It doesn't make a difference. If you're not going to end up in your marriage, you're not going to end up. But why wouldn't you put effort forward to try to have those steps in the right direction with the person you're with now? Right? I never understand those things, and I see it all the time. I see it all the time. So what happened to that guy?
Yeah.
Why did he change? Oh, he got divorced. Oh, that's great. Maybe he should have done that when he was married 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe it would have
Right.
worked out. Now there's no guarantee, but what I'm trying to say is all those things matter, right? You putting your part matters. You taking care of your health matters. You positioning yourself to get better matters. Thinking, reading stuff, learning about parenting, learning about relationships matters. All of those things matter because it could put yourself in a different mentality how to approach a situation. Because at the same time, when you're dealing with grief, I mean, between the both of us, like my wife's a very strong individual. Okay, she's a very strong individual, and we try to balance off, right? We try to balance off when we're down. If she's down, I try to be up. If I'm up and she's down, then we kind of just like flip it off, right? We try not to be at the same time where we're all destroyed. Don't get me wrong, there's periods where all of us together, we hurt. I'll give you a good example. Right? Another thing is, as a family, as a marriage and kids, you got to make sure that you don't take a situation that can be difficult like this and kind of like just vomit on everybody else because you're going to destroy other people. You can't do
Mm.
that. We were on a cruise last year, and it was June. I don't remember when it was for a spring break, right? So the 13th of every month, he was killed June 13th of 22. So the 13th, we'd go to church every 13th, and we'd go to church and have a mass for him. So we were in some island out there in the middle of nowhere. We were on a cruise. And man, everybody, it was an off day. We got to an island. Everybody could do whatever they want. And I was like, we're going to go to church. Us four, we're going to go to church together. Nobody knew where we were going. I said, no, we're going to go do a few things. We got out there early. We walked out. We found a church in the middle of nowhere out there. And we spent, we spent about a half hour. And in church, we cried together a lot. We cried a lot together. But after that, you know what we did? We said, we're not going to ruin other people's vacations. You know what we're going to do? We're going to go back. We're going to spend time, and we're going to put ourselves together, right? We're going to hurt together. We're going to go through this together. But then after that, let's not destroy their vacation. There's no need to bring them down. Let's move forward from there. So all those things are important, to work on in a relationship and your family and all those areas. I know I touched a lot of different topics. Obviously, none of this is scripted, brother. We're just rolling as we're talking here. So
yeah, 100%. But I think that's what I enjoy about podcasting is that we are just having conversations and not scripted. It just is what it is. But you mentioned all that you kind of talked about there. There's a level of accountability. There's a level of self-reflection, and there's a level of of kind of understanding of where you are and who you are, that I think when you talk about like guys blow up when they get married, or wives blow up and they don't look the same as they did when they were dating, and then they change when they get divorced. There's this level of comfort that we get once we get with a person, or we get comfortable with our situation. And we mentioned earlier, band-aids and kind of cover things up, and we lose that self-reflection of, man, I'm not who I used to be. I need to be better. Physically, mentally, emotionally, we just accept that this is what it is until something major happens, and then we start making these changes now. And obviously, you've done the work, and so I'm sure you have a different level of awareness around who you are and who you're becoming. But prior to that, were you prior to what happened with your son, were you at all in the personal development, that kind of stuff? Were you reading books at that time, or
it started for me in 2019 is where it started for me.
Okay.
It was actually August 1st of 2019 is when I made the decision that I wanted to change. I really wanted to change. And what changed for me was at that time I was 260 pounds at that time. And I was just grossly overweight, and just not being optimal in any area, and I really, one of the things that happened, you said you taught the athletes, my kid, he was at a baseball tournament in Tennessee, and he grounded out, and he got benched because he didn't hustle down the line. And I had this massive conversation with my kid in a cabin. I ripped into this kid, man. I ripped into him about effort and discipline, 100%, coming out here and wasting time, just all the shit we tell our kids, but we're not doing ourselves. Let me tell you something, I felt horrendous, man. I felt so bad after that conversation because of the way I treated my kid, looking at myself in the mirror, and I'm like, you slob. How could you ever talk to your kid when you're not doing those things yourself, And August 1st, and I just got after it. I really did. Anything I could get my hands on, Rod, in the space of getting better, I did it. I started waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, which for me was a big deal, getting a workout in, running, walking, watching what I eat. I really became fanatical about everything getting better in any space I could, right? I really wanted to improve for my wife and my kids. I just wanted to get so much better. And looking back at that, maybe it was just me listening to the universe and my conscience, right? And God putting a message in my mind saying, hey, there's some challenges coming your way, right? And if you don't put the work in right now, this is going to be pretty difficult for you. And let me tell you something. If I wouldn't have done all that work, and still, look, I'm hurting, man. Our family is hurting. Okay, nobody's healed out of this situation, but I'm convinced if I would have not done that work I did years before, this would be a total different situation, a total different mentality right now than what I have currently based off the circumstances. So yes, it's 2000. I really started to make some big changes, extreme changes.
The reason I asked is because usually what we see is like there's this kind of life event. Something happens and then we make a change, or something's coming and we start to change to prepare for it. But for guys that are listening that maybe haven't gotten there yet and just are kind of in the middle somewhere, like you have to start working on yourself now, whether there's a situation or not, whether there's, a past experience or something coming up, because you're always preparing yourself and always trying to be better than you were yesterday, because you don't know what's going to come, right? You don't know what's coming up. But if you're preparing yourself, right, and you're putting on your armor and you got everything kind of lined up, when those situations come, you'll be better prepared to handle them. Because the worst case scenario is that you're not prepared when opportunity comes, right? It's one thing to not get the opportunity at all. It's another thing to get the opportunity and not be prepared for it when it comes. And that's an athlete thing that I tell my athletes all the time, is like, especially for the ones that are fighting for a spot. Like, I have guys that are, freshmen in college and fighting for a roster spot, and kind of like, they're going to redshirt me this year, so it's not a big deal. Like, bro, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because somebody gets hurt and they pull that red shirt, you got to step in and make it happen. And the same thing happens for us as fathers. Is like, we get comfortable and we're doing our thing, our day to day, and everything's kind of working out the way we want it to, but we don't know when the next thing is going to happen. So we got to stay after it and stay working on being better. And I'm assuming, guys are listening to the podcast, they're kind of already on that trajectory, right? You're obviously listening to a podcast on fatherhood because you're interested in fatherhood and want to be a better father, right? So you guys are already on the right path. But I'm saying, double down on it. Right? Like get deeper into it, right? Listen to the books that we're talking about. Go find some of these people. Like Ed Milet is phenomenal. I love listening to Ed. Goggins, Frisella, Wes, like all these guys are great guys to listen to kind of not pick their brain, but because you don't need to. They share pretty openly. But if you're trying to improve yourself, this is definitely the people that you want to kind of listen to. And there's a bunch of other guys. I mean, and ladies
There's a lot.
too. Yeah.
There's a lot. There's a
But
lot.
you
There
have to
definitely
turn
is
you
a
have to
lot.
turn your
Yes.
attention to it. You have to turn your attention to it or you miss it, right? Because like you said, if I'm just on social media and scrolling, I'm going to scroll past that. Or it might not even show up. There's going to be some funny video with like somebody gets run over by a bull, and there's going to be like a sports highlight, and there's going to be some like girl, and there's going to be all these different things coming up, and the quote by so and so is going to I'm going to scroll past that. I'm going to miss it unless I'm looking for it, unless I turn my attention to it.
I mean,
And that's what we have to do.
think about it on IG, right? I mean, if you look at a girl's, I don't want to say bad words. I don't know, it's probably PG, but if you look at a girl's picture on IG, you get another 10 in a matter of seconds. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
it's amazing. Like my wife will get my IG, she'll be like my For You, and it's like chicks, and I'll be like, bro, I looked at like 2 pictures and I have like 20 pop on my feed. I'm like, you know what I'm saying? Like, right? They feed you whatever you're looking at there before you know you're lost, right? It is like, what is going on? You just wasted all this time in that situation. Yeah, you're correct, 100%. You got to be conscious and aware and take action on the right things.
And I've said this before, the algorithm and the people who create it are smart, right? They're going to give you what you want to see. Like, they're not messing around with this. Like, this is how they make money. So they're going to give you more of what you want to see. You have to have an ability to curate your algorithm. The more positive stuff, and you just said this a second ago, the more positive stuff you look at, the more you promote positivity, right? It's like the reticular activating system. You buy a red car, all of a sudden, all you see on the freeway are red cars. Like you're fully aware of all the red cars. And it's the same thing happens with your algorithm. If you are looking at positive things or things that are going to help you be better, more of those things start to show up. And every once in a while, they'll sprinkle a bikini in there to throw you off path. You just got to scroll past that and get back on track.
Yeah. Absolutely. But one thing you talked about a topic, you talked about being prepared. During the pandemic, my father-in-law got sick. He was in New York and he had to go to a hospital. They're going to put him on a breathing machine. And man, I went outside. I remember telling myself, I went outside and I prayed and I was like, God, please don't let this guy die. I was like, right now, we were going through the thick of it with our oldest. Our relationship was just the strongest because of the challenges we were having. I was like, as a family, we cannot deal with him passing away right now, right? And the next day, he got better. But what I realized is asking for that was the wrong thing to ask for. Because what I should have been asking for was strength for whatever comes to be able to handle it and give me the right mentality to be able to handle it. because not knowing 2 years later, and then here we're looking at the situation. Now our oldest passed away, and now we have to deal with the death of a young one, right? So, which one's stronger? Would it have been the older one passing away or our kid passing away? Probably the one that our kid passed away. They're both going to be hurtful, right? But I
Right.
mean, one's more tragic than the other, you know? So
Right.
there was no stopping that. But what we should have been asking for was preparation, guidance, right mentality, things to be able to put us in that process to be able to overcome in a situation like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that leads me to ask then, how have you leaned on your faith in this time? Because obviously you've done the work on yourself, and that's part of it, right? Faith without works is dead. But what are some of the things that maybe you are doing in the faith department to kind of help with the grief process?
Well, that's actually something that our son has helped us out with, right? Because our son goes to Catholic school. I was raised Catholic, but I never went to church really. And our kid is very religious. Believe it or not, our son is very, very religious. And he's put us on a path where, he just has a lot of faith in God, And we go to church every Sunday now. We go to church every single Sunday as a family. We do our best to sometimes we'll miss here and there, but we started to do that. We did get married through the church, and it's been important. It's really been important for us to do that. It really, really has. It's been crucial. It's been important. It's helped us out a lot. But I'm not going to say that I'm the one that leaned in that way. That was my son that pushed us in that way. Believe it or not, our 15-year-old had a lot to do with it.
That's actually really cool though, because I think when someone, because as a leader, as a father, like we're kind of always the tip of the spear, but to embrace your son being the one to want to push you forward into it, and then finding some peace and some solace and some healing through it, and as his leader, you're allowing him to use what works for him to deal with it as well, as opposed to like, hey, this is the way I'm going to handle it. Now everybody has to handle it the way I'm handling it. You give him the almost the autonomy to be like, hey, dad, or hey, family, this is what's working. Let's do this, and then you all kind of join in. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that was really important. I was very impressive. I tell you that much. It was very, very impressive. I got to give him the credit for it. I'm going to take the credit for that on that side. Don't get me wrong. So I'm a big believer in God. I believe in everything of, God created the universe, created us all. I believe in the whole idea of the whole karma debt, right? You can't do wrong to people and expect to have a good outcome. I believe in all those things, treating people the right way. But to say I was at church on a Sunday on a weekly basis, the answer is no. I wasn't, and this doesn't have to be a Catholic church, obviously, whatever your faith is. But you got to
Right.
lean on something, because if you don't lean, one of the things, this is important too, Rod, that you touched that subject. With our oldest, we had no presence of God in his life, none. And I don't think you have to fear God, but there has to be some sense where we all have a moral compass of what's right and wrong, and we have to have an understanding that there is consequences morally to decisions you make, right? And how you operate is very important. And there was no presence of that. That was a big mistake on our part, big mistake.
Right.
And when you operate like that, then you have no regard for others, or you believe that your decisions, it doesn't matter, because you're not operating from above. That can be a big problem. That can be a very big problem. And in this instance, it showed. It really, really did. I really believe that had a lot to do with it in that situation. I really do.
Yeah. You definitely need to have a sense of accountability to something bigger than you. Being the king of the castle and being the king of the house is one thing, but like knowing that there's a king above you that you have to be accountable morally to is really important. And I think instilling that in our children's lives is our responsibility, right? Regardless, and like you said, I'm a Christian by faith, but I'm not, if you're Muslim or you're Catholic or whatever your faith is, right? I'm not going to judge you. It's not my place. But whatever it is that allows you to have some moral compass that sets you in a right path to do right by others, and the golden rule, and treat others the way that you would like to be treated, there has to be some level of that. Because when there isn't, what we see a lot of is people just have no regard for other people. And you see less and less of it, I feel like, every day. Right? Just stuff that's happening in the world. Like if you turn on the news right now, you're like, Jesus, people hate people. Like people really just don't like other people. It's because there's less and less moral fiber in the day-to-day life of the average American, I think.
I agree with that big time. Before I didn't see it like that. Like I never used to look at. I'll give you a perfect example. I never used to look at how you made money. It didn't matter, right? I figured if you hustled, it wasn't a big deal, right? Because you know you're making some money, it's not a problem. Well, I don't agree with that no more, right? Because based off the situation we're in right now, somebody that was making money off of doing immoral things, right? Selling drugs to
Hmm.
a kid, ended up putting him in a predicament where he's no longer here with us. So that was a big consequence towards obviously our oldest made that decision, but that person destroyed somebody's life and as well destroyed somebody's family. So, you
Right.
know, all of that matters 100%. I used to not operate like that. I used to not operate like that. Now I'm very conscious of every single thing because I don't want to pay, I want to pay that karma debt twice. You know, I really don't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's something that I think we can all kind of take inventory of, right? Is the whole karma thing, right? Because I think a lot of us, when we are kind of moving through the world and we're trying to navigate our family through the world, we're concerned so much with our family and what we're doing in our household and in our, maybe in our neighborhood, maybe in our community, but it's very self-centered in terms of just taking care of what our family needs. But the reality is that what we do in our house will affect the house next door, will affect the house down the street, will affect the community and the city, this county. Like it echoes out, right? And so what we do in our home also has to have some bearing in our minds on what is going to happen with, you know, when our family leaves the house. Like, what are we doing here that's setting them up so when they leave the house that they're also going to be impactful and be able to do, you know, the things that they need to do in order to be successful or just to be a contributing
Yeah, we had a lot of that right now. Things would be very different in our country if you had more people like that. That's absolute fact.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so we've talked about a lot, and I feel like there's so much more that we can kind of continue to go into because you know fatherhood is a topic that I don't think I can talk enough about. But since we're talking about it, what does fatherhood mean to you?
Shit. It's leadership. It's your job to be able to provide as many resources as possible for your children to be able to make good decisions in the future. That's what our job is because you can't control what they're going to do. They're going to make their own decisions, but you got to provide them, and we have to do our best to provide them with the best resources possible to make better decisions for their future, and not to be afraid to share your failures. You know, I share every failure I've had with my kid, man. I really do. I share them with him. I'm going to share them with my daughter. I tell my wife, you need to share your story. You need to share your failures, and you need to be open about it because it's the only way we can have progression. Is not being the perfect parent, but being an open parent, that's honest, that doesn't have to be holding things back, you know, because that's what we're going to teach our kids is the lessons that we had.
So now I have a question, and I like that answer, but I do have a question in regards to that. So when you say you're sharing your failures, are you just going back and like, hey, when I was younger, this happened or that happened, or are you kind of sharing them
100%,
as
brother.
we go forward?
Absolutely. 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 I'm an open book with him. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm an open book with him. Absolutely.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
good. That's what I was
I mean,
wondering because
I don't think a lot of parents would want to do that, you know.
yeah.
Uh, but I'm at the point right now where I really don't care. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because what's the worst that can happen? If I'm honest with my kids, they might judge me, they might not, but I have more of a potential of providing a solution to a challenge that they might have in the future and a perspective that they could approach things different in the future. And if I didn't share it, it's because it's ego driven out of me that I don't want to share something with him. But if I share it and I'm being honest about it, if you're willing, this is the thing though, this is a challenge, this is important, Rod. Most people don't share things because they're not doing the work necessary to change the person that they want to become the person that they want to be. So they can't share things because they're not putting the work necessary to become the person that they want to be in the future. So they don't want to share their failures. I share my failures because I know I'm an ongoing project and I'm working very hard on myself. And my past mistakes are not indicative of what it's going to be for the future for me, but they could be huge lessons for you, meaning my kids, right? So that's why I do share those things.
I like that. I like that. I like that perspective and I like that mindset is you know, sharing it because that's not who I am anymore. I'm a work in progress. I'm moving forward. That is who I was and this is what I did and this is what I learned from it. Now you take the lesson and you run with it. I love that. I love that. All right. If we let's say we're able to get everybody, all the fathers kind of to listen to this part of the podcast. They've been listening, but everybody's tuned in right now. Every father in the world is listening in various languages. What is the message that you want them to hear?
Leadership is influence. And if you're not getting better, your family's not going to get better. There's no way it's going to happen. Leadership is influence. So you have to do everything possible, regardless of what's going around you, to put the work forward to become a better person. In every angle, any way possibly, you need to do that work. Regardless, if everything looks horrible, you have to put the work forward to get better.
Like that. And something that one of my coaches used to say is attitude is a reflection of leadership. And your athletes are going to, either you're coaching it or you're letting it happen, right? Like, so whatever they're doing, it's because of you, right? Not because they're malicious or they were trying to get over or they're trying to not do what you asked them to do. There's something about you that you're not doing that's like they're reflecting, right? And so I like that. I like leadership is influence. I really like that. Okay. If we do the same thing, it's obviously a smaller setting now, but we get both of your children to listen to the podcast. What is it that you want them to hear?
Decisions matter. Decisions matter, and at the end of the day, where you're going to end up in the future is just a piled up accumulation of the small decisions you made in your whole life. And you have to act according towards a moral compass that you have in your heart, what's right, what's wrong, and act according in your gut to make better decisions going forward. And that's something that you're going to have to grow with yourself, right? You're going to have to figure that out yourself. Obviously, you want to get it. If I'm talking to my kids, I'm going to tell them, you're going to have to do the work yourself. Nobody can do it for you. You have to do the work to get better. You have to do the work to have a different perspective. And at the end of the day, there's no victory in victimhood. So it doesn't matter what happens, everything's a lesson, and you're going to learn from it. And you need to make sure you put the steps forward to be able to accomplish that, because I'm not going to be here tomorrow. I talk to my kid about that all the time. I tell them, listen, I might not be here tomorrow. The day tomorrow, I might not be here. But what I need you to understand is all the things I've talked to you about, you have to use those things for yourself. And then you have to do the work necessary to be able to have progression for your wife, your kids, your husband, your kids, and to get better for society.
Man, I really, really like that. And I don't know that I've ever said to, well, I've said this before that, me and my wife may not be here tomorrow. And so my daughters, you guys are all that you have. But I never led it with take the lessons that I've taught you, right? Because if I'm not here tomorrow, I've taught you all that I can at this point. You got to be able to take those lessons and now take action. I think that's a beautiful message to tell your children, especially as they move forward in life. I've given you all that I can give you. Now take those and go be successful, go prosper with what you've learned. I love it. I love it. I love it. So if guys obviously listen to the podcast and they are interested in fatherhood and maybe want to know a little bit more about you, or maybe want to reach out and say, hey, enjoyed your episode of the podcast, just a high five or a handshake, what would be the best way for them to do that?
IG, the real JC Bautista. So you could just reach out to the real JC Bautista. That's how it is. TheRealJC, letter than J and C, and Bautista. My last name is Batista. So you can reach out to me, send me a DM. I'm pretty active on there, and anything a person needs. I'm not in the coaching world or nothing like that. I've been doing this because it just makes me feel better. But there's a lot of people who reach out to me, Rod, that they need help, and a lot of people need things, and it's not something that I'm against in the future, but if anybody needs anything, they could reach out, I really just want to do this to help.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, you have a unique perspective that I think a lot of guys that are listening to this podcast, and myself included, can learn from and can position ourselves to prepare better for the unforeseen, right? Whether it be losing a child or just, the interactions of day-to-day life. preparing ourselves and taking care of ourselves so that we are better prepared for whatever may come. I think that's important, right? It doesn't have to be a coaching program. It doesn't have to be, these 4 pillars that you got to hit or whatever. Just a conversation of, hey man, I'm going through X, Y, and Z, I just need to talk to somebody, that kind of thing. So I appreciate you being open enough to share yourself and your time to talk to guys about that.
Absolutely, man. I really appreciate your time and your audience and just everything. Hopefully this helps people. I'm confident it will, a few, and that's the goal.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I just said it, but I'll say it again. I appreciate you taking the time to come share with us, to kind of, because I know as a dad, times it's busy, right? It was hard for us to even get this linked up because I had stuff yesterday. So I'm really appreciative anytime someone takes the time to come and sit down with us and talk about fatherhood, to talk about their journey, because I understand how important time is. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your time.
Thank you, bro. Thank you very much. I'm grateful.
All right, fellas. That is it for this episode of the Fit Fatherhood podcast. Stay tuned because another great podcast is coming your way. You just tuned into another episode of the Fit Fatherhood podcast. Thank you once again for listening. If you haven't already, go ahead and follow me at You Can Call Me Coach on Instagram. Also follow the podcast at Fit Fatherhood, the number 4 and the letter U on You Can Call Me Coach. Go ahead and flip over to the next episode, man. I know you love this one, so you'll probably love the next one. Excited for you guys to hear it.